This is a talk called Introducing Impulsing. And in this talk, I'll tell you about a theory, the subject of a book called The Conscious Stream, which is written at the lay level. And I'll tell you why now is the time a new edition of the book should be written. Well, I'm Denise Ingebo. I'm an independent theorist in neuroscience, the study of the nervous system. And when I was growing up, like many of us, my feelings hurt a lot. And when it didn't get better, and since I believe that you have to understand something before you can fix it or keep it working well, I began what became a lifelong study to learn how feelings happen at the physical level. So I could see what it takes to keep my feelings balanced. And I say see what it takes because I'm the kind of person that learns by seeing how something works, by seeing what's happening. Now, if you think that hurt feelings may be responsible for some of the bad behavior that we experience in the world today and the pain and disruption it causes, both domestically in our homes and between groups of people, I think you'll be interested in this theory because it shows how feelings, including hurt feelings, are formed and released. And we can use this insight then to see what it takes to restore and maintain balanced feelings. So the domino effect of hurt feelings and the pain and disruption it causes in our life is less likely to occur. Now, after working on my own for a few years, I was admitted to the University of Oregon, Clark Honors College, independent study in the Department of Neurobiology. And the technique that I used led to proposing the presence of impulse trails, which we can use like electricity to describe the work that's done in the pathways or the circuits of the nervous system in terms that we can relate to. So let's look at this theory from two ways, physically and then its conscious counterparts. Now, physically, beginning with the sensory neuron groups embedded in the body's tissue, the nervous system is made up of groups of specialized neurons with branches that reach inward and join with other more specialized groups or neural architectures. And these form pathways. And then when these areas are packed together, they form the spinal cord and the brain. Then when the connections reach back into the body's tissue, we can say that the circuitry is closed. So the circuitry is made up of linked neuron groups that begin and end in the body's tissue. So on this backdrop, when sensory neuron groups like the eyes and the ears, or the tissue in the muscle and in the skin, when they're monitoring conditions in the body and in the environment, they're absorbing energy, different forms of energy, light waves, sound waves, temperature, pressure. And they immediately take that energy and translate it into another form of energy called electrochemical energy, or impulses. So at this point, these neuron groups are speaking the same language. So then they generate patterns of impulses into the circuitry, group by group, forming a lightning-like series of energized neuron groups, kind of like falling dominoes. And this lightning-like trail or series can be called an impulse trail or impulsing. And it does different work as different areas of the system are energized. So it's like defining electricity and describing the work that it does as components of a radio are energized to form a stream of sound. In this case, we're using impulsing to describe the work done in the conscious pathways of the nervous system to form our stream of consciousness. Now, as the theory was developing, I came to believe that it may be as fundamental, impulsing may be as fundamental to understanding how the nervous system works as electricity is to understanding how radio works. Well, let's look at the conscious pathways, the work that impulsing does there. The conscious pathways are a inner circuitry in the nervous system made up of 4 linked areas that neuroscientists relate to consciousness or kinds of conscious work. So as we trace a trail from any of these areas, they enter and energize a central area of the system they all have in common. And when a trail from any one of these four areas energizes and enters this area, we experience a single separate conscious instant that is added to our evolving conscious stream. So it's like adding a frame of film onto a reel of film, in both cases forming a seamless experience. Now, when there's efficient resolving activity in these pathways, we experience a steady formation and release of feelings. And this is kind of a sense of good exercise. It's a sense of emotional well-being. In fact, just knowing that we're designed to resolve whatever we're exposed to gives me a sense of security, a faith in people, another form of well-being. Now back to the book. A few years ago, I published a book called The Conscious Stream, Review Edition, and it covers these concepts in more detail. That's a little outdated in terms of terminology, so trajectories are now called impulse trails, but it does cover over 50% of the theory. Now, when we have a set of concepts that describes how something works and describes the work that it does, how the system monitors and resolves the simultaneous states the body is exposed to in order to maintain balance in the system, between systems, and between the body and the environment. When we have a set of concepts that explains this reasonably, we can call this basic science or raw science. So for right now, that's what I'll call it, basic science. And we can use this to show how the resolving and monitoring work in the conscious pathways forms our conscious stream. And we also can use it to show the relationship between activity in a system and corresponding symptoms and sensations. So these become clues or signals. When we experience them in consciousness, we can relate that to the corresponding activity. Now, in the conscious pathways, when we experience a sensation or thought that generates excessive stress that's unreleased, we can relate that to what we know about how the system works, and so we can see what caused it. But we also can use our insight to propose what kind of work in the other areas that will lead to a resolution of the sensation or thought that in turn will relieve the stress and restore balance. Soon after I published the first edition, I realized that we need a more practical understanding of how the system works. So we need to use the basic science to develop concepts to maintain emotional balance so these excessive stresses don't come up in the first place. So for example, when we understand how the body's metabolism works, we can plan and practice a balanced diet. So scurvy and fatigue and other symptoms of imbalance in our nutrition don't occur. Now, when it comes to the conscious pathways, we need similar concepts. An applied science to same thing to help us maintain emotional balance so these excessive stresses don't come up in the first place. So we don't have a full clarification of these concepts yet, but we can start by defining a healthy lifestyle as a pattern of balanced activities that leave a series of balanced feelings in its wake. So we need to use our basic science of how the system works to develop similar concepts, to plan and practice a healthy lifestyle to maintain balanced feelings on a regular basis. We can use this insight, this basic science, to help us identify activities and resources that we can then use to develop our own personal, unique, healthy lifestyle that generates its own pattern of balanced feelings. And then we can meet locally, socially, and identify the personal and social activities that further develop and refine our lifestyle. And we can contribute physical and intellectual resources to meet the needs of our local communities and the interfacing communities and cultures that make up our planet. So together we can develop and practice concepts that help us support this part of our health, our emotional health. So my plan now is to write a new edition of the Conscious Stream that both helps us restore and maintain balanced feelings. So far, I've refined and clarified the original concepts. I've added illustrations and I've updated the terminology. Now, you can get a free PDF of this book at impulsing.net, or you can buy a copy at universalpublishers.com or other online sources. Now, if you'd like to help jumpstart this project and have a PayPal account, you can donate to Impulsing at iCloud.com. The maximum donation is $20, no strings attached either way. And I'll be contributing routine updates. So I'm inviting you to take part, to consider the theory, and to consider sharing it with anyone that you think may be interested, to see how it could be helpful for your life and for your community. I'm Denise Ingevall. Thank you.